most small businesses end up having the same issues. It's either not having enough content, having duplicate content, um, or not having their Google Business profile optimized. Those are usually like the top three things that we run into with most small businesses. And then like with the thin content issues, you get issues with internal linking, poor navigation, pages not getting indexed that should be indexed. All those things come along with the thin content issues that they have too, and duplicate content issues they have. But that really is what it mostly comes down to for a lot of small businesses. And those are hard issues to overcome for them. And I understand why. You don't have time to sit down and write content for each of your services. And the workaround for that is to make them pretty much exactly the same on every page. It's just unfortunate that you can't do that in Rank. So they do end up, what we see happening is a lot of businesses start by doing it all themselves or having their developer do the initial SEO. Then they kind of, they do pretty well for a while. And it's because of PPC or ads or direct mail or whatever they're doing otherwise. And they're getting traffic from their brand, and they realize that, oh, wait, we're only getting traffic from our brand name. No one, if anyone searches for AC repair, Greenville, South Carolina, we don't show up at all. And that's when they realize that they need SEO, is when they get to the point where they're like, oh, okay, well, no one can find us for anything other than our name.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Super excited always to have guests on to talk about SEO and search marketing in general. So Amanda, Amanda Jordan's my guest today. Amanda, why don't you talk about how you got into SEO? Everybody seems to have their own story about how they ended up in the SEO world.
Yeah, mine is really interesting. I initially thought I wanted to be an engineer, and quickly found out I was the only female in any of my classes, and that didn't sparkle with me. So I kind of felt lost for a little bit, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a friend that I worked with at this ice cream shop, and he said, hey, why don't you just go to the school for the same thing I'm going to school for? And I said, sure. And that's how I actually ended up in the marketing field at all. I went to school for commercial graphics. And my internship that I got from that program was with a company that had me start with proofing local ads. And then when they started getting local SEO clients, they asked me if I would come on board full time. And that's how I got into SEO. It was but not something that I expected to be into. I thought I was going to be an engineer, but I think I chose the right thing for me. Like, I definitely like the psychology side of SEO and marketing, and you don't get that with civil engineering. So I think I ended up where I needed to be.
Yeah. Well, that's a great journey. Now, often folks who did make it through engineering or computer science end up on the very technical side of SEO, right?
Yeah.
So they're dealing a lot with code optimization and such. But you didn't go that traditional learning route. You ended up sort of coming in through the side door of design and graphics and ads into local SEO. But did you still find yourself sort of wanting to know sort of the technical ends of SEO as well, beyond sort of the content-centric SEO?
Oh, definitely. So I worked with J.R. Oaks, who's a very well-known technical SEO in the space. He's very into Python, building his own tools, and he definitely got me interested in the more technical side of SEO and really taught me how to talk about SEO in a way that a wider audience can understand. Like, I would say that JR is highly responsible for where I am now. He told me to get on Twitter. I was not on Twitter when I met him. He told me to get on Twitter. He told me that I could do public speaking. He told me that I knew enough. He taught me how to speak about SEO with clients, how to write documentation in a way that clients can actually use and understand. And those are the skills in SEO that are not talked about a lot. They're often swept under the rug, but it was interesting that I learned those things from someone who's very technical in SEO.
Right.
Yeah. I did learn a little bit of Python. I do play around with the AI tools and everything and build my own things with them. But like, yeah, I would consider myself more of a like an SEO generalist with like a strong background in local specifically, because most of what I work with are businesses who are in the local space.
Yeah, well, local certainly has some of its own challenges unique to local as it relates to SEO, not just because the SERPs often look a little bit different when there's local intent, but also the businesses that are local providers of something, right? Often, if you can't sort of compare them with the national providers, right?
Yeah.
Because they certainly can't expect necessarily to rank right up there. So, you've got obviously a local travel agency is not going to rank right up there with Expedia and Travelocity and
Yeah.
those kinds of players.
Yeah.
So they have some really unique challenges that relate to SEO from a strategy and content planning perspective, but also from a managing expectations perspective.
Yeah.
So, where should they start? Like if somebody's like, okay, I'm noticing that my competition's ranking and I'm not, right? So
Yeah.
how do you take them through the sort of strategic and planning part of SEO?
Yeah, so like the strategic part of SEO is my favorite part, and it's what I've done in every role I've had, and in any role I had where it wasn't an SEO role, I made it an SEO role so I could do strategy. So it's my favorite thing about SEO in general, and communicating with clients is also one of my favorite things because I love the idea of taking something that we use so much like marketing jargon around and making it so a business owner, like a guy who started his own plumbing company, can understand what I'm talking about and why it's important, and I can get him to buy into the recommendations I'm making, just so I can get someone who's the CEO of a franchise to buy into those recommendations. It's using different language, but still your goal is the same. The way that you have to think about it is kind of the same, because you're still trying to get the client to see the value in what you're offering and how it relates to the exact outcome that they're looking for or their business initiatives. So with someone who's like, they look at their competitors and see like, wow, I'm behind. I think that's a hard thing to find out why for yourself. I think you more than likely will need someone who has experience in SEO to tell you why you're behind, because there are so many different factors that go into local SEO. And the reason why you're behind in Google Maps may be different from the reason why you're behind in organic. So it may not even be the same things that are causing you issues. It's not uncommon for someone to say, I'm behind for this keyword. And then you look and all their competitors have the keyword in their business name. And they're the one that doesn't have the keyword in their business name. So no matter what they do, if that competitor's name is the keyword and they're actually doing SEO on top of that, not just doing the spam, it's going to be nearly impossible to catch up with that unless you're like the person who's searching is very close to you and the proximity becomes a bigger factor then. But yeah, I would say get in touch with an SEO, because the first thing that I do is I look at like I draw from my experience and looking at so many websites, and I do comparisons of competitor websites all the time, so much of the time, just because in local SEO it's kind of hard not to do it, because you're not trying to beat the national competitors. Sometimes they show up for like directory listings and things like that. Sometimes you do have them show up, but a lot of the times you're trying to beat some guy that's across town who just happens to be ranking better than you. And you just need to know what they're doing and doing it better than they're doing it to win. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about what any other website in the world is doing. If you can figure out what number one and number two are doing and capitalize on their weaknesses and strengthen yourselves in the places you're behind, you're likely to succeed. So first thing I would definitely recommend looking at is your Google business profile. Do you have reviews? Do you have pictures? Are you using the right business category? Those types of things are the things that I look at first. And then secondly, I would start looking at your website. Do you have pages for each of your major services? If you have multiple locations, do you have like a homepage or landing page for each location? And if you don't have those things, those are likely the reasons why you're behind. Like those are kind of like the most basic things that we look for immediately. And then if we're like, hey, our content is actually better than theirs, our listing is just as good as theirs, there's no logical, like we can't see a reason why we're not doing as well. Then we look into things like backlinks, internal linking, structured data, site speed, all of those other things, if we've already looked at the on page and the like Google business profile factors.
Right, right. Well, one gratifying thing about sort of hyper local and local SEO is that if you do find some of these obvious roadblocks that people have put in front of Google understanding who they are, what they do,
Mhm.
et cetera, their name, address, and phone number, all the things that you can fix super easily, you can sometimes move the needle pretty quickly, right?
Yeah,
Which is really gratifying. You don't always get that with an enterprise client, right? Where you can
that's true.
actually see the results within 3 or 6 months. It's much more
Yeah.
gratifying.
That is very true because with enterprise clients, even if they're in the local space, it usually takes longer unless you're going into an area where your competition has done nothing, or it's a area where there's not a ton of competition. Then you're more likely to kind of just take over right away, just because you're a bigger brand. You likely have more links. So you're like you have you're better known as an entity online in general, then you do have a chance. And local businesses do actually run into that sometimes as an issue, is that, oh, wait, this guy who has so many backlinks because they have multiple locations, it makes it harder for me to be found. But with some recent updates, Google has kind of been accounting for that a little bit. And I'm seeing a lot of one location businesses being able to outrank multi-location businesses just because they are so location centric and specific. That's actually reminds me of one of the things I see local businesses run into a lot as an issue, and it's being too focused on having as much content as possible instead of the quality of the content. So they're like, oh yeah, we have a page about this city, so we're good. But if you have a competitor whose entire website is dedicated to that city and they've spent time on their content and perfecting kind of what their SEO strategy is like, it's going to be a lot harder to catch up with them than you think it is, because links will only carry you so far in local SEO. Like you really do have to put in the work for content and topical authority and things like that to be seen too.
For sure, for sure. One thing that's somewhat unique to local SEO and visibility locally is that a lot of times people, when they're searching with local intent, they're doing it on their smartphone and they're doing it with voice-based search. And people's query behavior in voice query versus written textual query tends to be a little bit different. So how does that end up changing your SEO strategy when you realize some significant chunk of these people are actually searching on their phones and they're just literally asking Google, where is this? Where is this closest one of these or whatever?
Yeah, the thing that I see businesses run into as the biggest issue is their content like depth and breadth. Like if it's not deep enough and it's not broad enough where you're covering a lot of the topic, you're not going to be able to show up for those searches. Like even if it's on mobile or if it's a voice search, you're less likely to show up. It's very common to see a business that will rank for like car accident lawyer, but not lawyers. And that is essentially the same thing. There's slightly different intent. You may be looking for a list of lawyers, but if you go from being number 2 for lawyer and being not on the first page at all for lawyers, that's a sign that there's like an issue with your page and you're being too focused on some specific keywords and Google's not finding you for other relevant keywords. And that ends up being a content issue often as well. I can definitely see also like SGE being one of those factors too, mobile SGE and voice search all being factors for having long tail keywords and content on your website that's not necessarily just based on the money keyword. That's what I call the keywords that are like car accident lawyer. The one where you're like, oh, this person looked that up. They are looking to hire a car accident lawyer. I don't have anything that I have to guess about that. Versus if someone looks up car accidents today, their intent may or car accident, their intent may be a little bit different. They may not be looking specifically to hire a lawyer. But with those money keywords, I see a lot of businesses getting too focused on bottom of the funnel. And while you should, of course, make sure you have a strong foundation there, like you still need to consider middle and top of funnel too, because you can feed people through their customer journey on your website if you do a good job of making that information very easy to find, focusing on the actual questions and comments and concerns that your actual customers have, not focusing only on search volume or keyword difficulty or those factors, but what do I know people are looking for when they've been in a car accident, those types of questions as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And of course, some of those other non-money keywords or less money keywords are more achievable, right?
Hmm.
Because if your competition isn't going after them and you do, you may be able to, you may not get the volume you're hoping, and you may not get quite the same level of intent, but it's still a super valuable click. And I think educating folks on that and why it's worth going after those types of queries and content is really key.
Yeah, it definitely helps build up your topical authority. And one of the things that we look at too is internal linking opportunities. So while it may not be the strongest keyword or topic for your business, it could still be an internal linking opportunity to those key pages that are focused on those money keywords at the same time.
Right, absolutely. So, the directories still exist, right? And of course, you've got the Yelp style directories and a bunch of other, somewhat antiquated yellow page type directories. And you've also got, to be honest, LinkedIn company pages end up being a really important secondary thing that will often rank when people have local search intent or company-based search intent, so especially if they're looking up the company to
Yeah.
decide, what's the reputation of this company, and it's a branded search. You certainly really have to think about your directory strategy there. So, do you often take people through sort of a secondary, like parallel path of, okay, and here's what we have to do for the directories? Because even if you manage to get in front of that person before they make a decision, they may do a vanity search on your brand, and then, you know,
Yeah.
the directories may end up there, and have to be pretty careful for a reputation perspective what shows up there.
Yeah, we definitely do that. We actually consider that part of our like Barnacle SEO
Right.
strategy is to make sure like, well, what are those secondary sites that the directory sites that do show up when someone searches for that term or our name, and how do we look when people see that? Is there something that we need to do strategy wise as far as getting more reviews? So we'll sometimes tell clients to push reviews to those sites instead. Except for Yelp, because of course that is good for Yelp at all. But for the other ones, or the ones that are kind of like pay to play, like sometimes it is worth to pay just because you're on the top of that listing and it's the number two result after your name. And so then you're number one and number two at
Yeah,
that
exactly.
point. Yeah. So like it really is like for us being in local SEO, and because we have other I guess search result features that show up from being in local, it's about having as much of the real estate on the first page as possible. So
Yeah.
like if there's ads, if there's LSAs, if there's the Google Maps, if there's organic, and now a lot of the times images are showing up more for like searches that aren't necessarily image focused. Like I've seen like for pediatric dentistry, I've seen like just image pack come up for that halfway down the page. So like we have so many different times that we can rank on the page for local SEO that it becomes like any opportunity you can get is one that you should take. At the very least, even if you can't say the lead came directly from Google, you may be able to attribute something to it if they came through a referral site that you really want to get you on the top of the page for that.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of folks outside of the SEO industry know the term barnacle SEO, right? I like to explain it as controlling as much of the SERP as possible,
Yeah.
right? With content that's all over the place, and directories are certainly one place. But I usually end up pitching that as digital PR, right? Because you're essentially trying to get positive mentions about
That's
you
true. Yeah.
in many different places as possible, even if they don't have a backlink. I mean, obviously, if they have a backlink, then you sort
Even
of
better.
kill
Yeah.
multiple birds with that stone. But
Yeah.
yeah, certainly, I think that's a key, epiphany that some people end up having, right? Like, oh, it's not only all about my domain name, right? There's lots of things that are going to show up on that search results page.
Yeah, that's actually a great SEO, Cindy Crum. She owns Mobile Moxie. And one of the things she's talked about is that you want to be like Google has so many different platforms that they use. You should be on all of them. So any opportunity Google gives you to show your brand, that's where you should be trying to be. So just like bringing all of the Google products into that as well. Like if Google has it, then you should be there. If you can get a knowledge panel for your business, then you should and claim it, you should do it. If you can like be included in a review knowledge panel for a product, you should try to be there. If you can get your images to rank, you should do it. Just building up your entity online as much as possible so you're inescapable about the topic that your business is about or whatever your business provides.
Yeah, absolutely. Which that dovetails perfectly into my next question, which is about content creation. Now, some people really hate content creation on the business owner side. And a related question or a related element to that is, one of the things that Google owns is YouTube, second largest search engine in the world, right?
Right.
And sort of not everybody's camera ready, right? When it comes to doing their own content, if on that side, right? So
Yeah.
you've got sort of all these different types of content, textual content, infographics and PDFs, et cetera, that you could be getting cranked out. But then that jump to YouTube or that jump to video content is potentially even a little more scary
Yeah.
for a business owner. So do you change your strategy based on sort of whether or not there's a charismatic internal person that can sort of that foundation for video content?
I mean, I'll make the recommendation even if there's no charismatic person on their side. If it's like I have a client of mine whose competitor ranks for like a best of products list, and their competitors just has a bunch of YouTube videos on that page. They're just embedded on the page. There's barely 200 words of content on the page, and it is the top ranking page for this keyword that has lots of search volume from people who are looking to buy, and they're ranking with just putting a page full of YouTube videos up. So I think a lot of different industries are slow to adapt to video, but I do believe it's a missed opportunity because it is another place on the search results where you can be visible and take up more space, because that would be my goal as a business, is to take up as much space as possible anytime anyone is searching for it. You're using another Google product, which they always like. You're providing more valuable resources that you can include on your website, because you can use those, you can transcribe those videos and add them to your website too. And then it's double use out of that content. You can use that YouTube video content on your other social media platforms. There's like so many uses for it that's beyond just putting it on YouTube, that if you are in an industry where you see your competitors are doing it and it's showing up in search results, you should be doing it whether you have a charismatic person or not. And eventually AI is going to be good enough at it that you don't even need to have a charismatic person. I've taught an AI tool to use my voice, and it records my, like, I can just give it a script and it will say the words in my voice for me. So it's getting there where you don't even need a charismatic person anymore.
Right.
To make videos, especially if they're informational. Now, if you're doing product reviews or something like that, you should have a person there. But there's some video types, especially if you're doing informational, especially if it's kind of like photos around your office and you just need to have a voiceover. There's definitely ways you can do that much easier now. But I do recommend a lot of different types of clients, especially those who work in healthcare, anyone that works with any type of like medical or med spa related type of business too, or anyone that has products where they would want to educate the customer on how to use the product or how to clean it or take care of it or the value of it. Like those all should be available in video as well as written, just because it makes your life easier. Like you can also use it to make your job much easier to do and have much more content to use across the board, not just on YouTube.
Great. And a lot of folks, maybe mistakenly believe that the owner or the VP of marketing needs to be the content creator. But we see that sometimes other employees or
Right.
customers or partners can end up being content creators or content co-creators. So
Right.
how do you take a person through that process of sort of deciding, either because the owner's not the charismatic one, but
Yeah.
in the case of video, but for other content too, because sometimes the employees know a lot of the questions that
Yeah.
customers ask better than the owner does because they're facing the customers more.
Yeah. I definitely think I definitely agree. It doesn't have to be the owner. It doesn't have to be anyone C-suite or a VP or anything like that. It can be employees who do it. In fact, it's probably more personable if an employee does it, especially if it's a person who's in that role that someone may actually talk to if they were to call or to engage with the business. So I think that's it's definitely a great idea. I think part of it, though, there is like a learning curve, especially if you never read a script before or anything like that. It can be a little bit frustrating at first, but it's definitely something you can lean into, especially if you have that hands-on experience. It makes it even easier because you're just talking about what you do. You're not rehearsing or reciting something. You're just speaking about what you do every day, and that makes it significantly easier to create YouTube videos and feel like you're providing some like useful knowledge to people as if you're the person who does the work. It's much easier to do it.
For sure. So same, what about like customers and prompting customer testimonials or
Yeah.
actually even upstream partners? I found that sometimes, if you don't want to necessarily go after the customer and ask for testimonials, that your suppliers that you work with have a good relationship with you.
Yeah.
And so you can sometimes co-create content with them. So there's almost an endless number of ways to generate the content. I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah, it is. It is really fun when you can get creative and find new ways to build content and build relationships with people within your industry. Because the stronger those relationships are, the more you have to draw on in the future to even strengthen your digital marketing strategy even more.
For sure. So let's switch to Google Analytics because GA4 is out. I know
Yeah.
that you occasionally chat about analytics and measurement. So seems to be like a love-hate relationship that some folks have with GA4. What's your point of view on GA4, and what do you miss that's missing from GA4, and what do you love about GA4, if anything?
Yeah, it definitely is takes some getting used to. It isn't universal analytics, that's for sure. But I do think it does make it easier to read the data in some ways. Like if you're doing a quick check in there and you want to look at a specific demographic or location and things like that, I feel like it's easier for someone who may not have been well versed in UA to go in and do it in GA4. I do like that it makes it easier to link and create connections between your different Google product accounts. So like if you're using BigQuery, it takes like 2 clicks to set up BigQuery with your GA4 account. And you can do Google ads pretty easily, things like that. I mean, are there lots of hiccups and issues with it? Absolutely. And it's not just Google's fault. It's a lot of these tools and companies that were interfacing with Universal Analytics weren't necessarily ready for the GA4 change either. And their tools did not work the way that they expected to once people were trying to get all their data in one place. So I think there's like some good and some bad with it. I think we can, for the most part, kind of get over and get used to it. I don't think anything in it or any of the changes are like earth shattering. I do work specifically in local SEO. So that maybe like my experience may differ from different areas of SEO. I imagine if you're editorial or publisher, it may feel a bit different when you're working on sites with tens of thousands of pages. And so that's just based on my personal experience. It's not been terrible. Definitely prefer UA just because I've used it for longer and more comfortable with it. But I do find it something that I can like use. I do like it that it's somewhat easier to set up some of the relationships between it and other Google products. But yeah, I would say I'm indifferent. That's been my word of the year, is to be unmoved and unchanged by things that I have no control over.
It's very stoic of you. Do you find that a lot of folks, particularly when you're working not so much with franchises and franchisees, but more when you're working with a specific local business, that they never even set up Search Console or Webmaster Tools, and that you
Yes.
sort of have this sort of immediate sort of lack of insight just because you were hoping it was there, and you're like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to wait a little while.
Yes, that is not unusual for them to not have GSC or possibly not even have GA4 set up and there being no historical data to pull from, which is like honestly kind of one of the more fun scenarios to be in to me, because it's like you have to find out what the issues are without looking at data and kind of getting, well, third-party data, but honestly, I don't trust any of those tools to be accurate because even when you compare it to Google's inaccurate data, it's way off still. So like
Mhm.
none of them are getting close to hitting the mark as far as guesstimating traffic and things
Yeah.
like that for a specific website, and especially with a small business because like the search volume in that area is so small for the for specific things, very specific things anyway, that there's not going to be a lot that third-party tools can do for you because of the small data set. But it is very fun and interesting because that is really one of the times when you really have to get into competitive analysis because seeing what the competitors who are winning doing, what they're doing is the best way to figure out where the gap is because you have no other data to go on as far as like figuring out where that gap could be. But really, most small businesses end up having the same issues. It's either not having enough content, having duplicate content, um, or not having their Google Business profile optimized. Those are usually like the top three things that we run into with most small businesses. And then like with the thin content issues, you get issues with internal linking, poor navigation, pages not getting indexed that should be indexed. All those things come along with the thin content issues that they have too, and duplicate content issues they have. But that really is what it mostly comes down to for a lot of small businesses. And those are hard issues to overcome for them. And I understand why you don't have time to sit down and write content for each of your services. And the workaround for that is to make them pretty much exactly the same on every page. It's just unfortunate that you can't do that in ranked. So they do end up, what we see happening is a lot of businesses start by doing it all themselves or having their developer do the initial SEO. Then they kind of they do pretty well for a while, and it's because of PPC or ads or direct mail or whatever they're doing otherwise. And they're getting traffic from their brand, and they realize that, oh, wait, we're only getting traffic from our brand name. No one, if anyone searches for AC repair, Greenville, South Carolina, we don't show up at all. And that's when they realize that they need SEOs when they get to the point where they're like, oh, okay, well, no one can find us for anything other than our name. That's a
Right.
problem. Yeah.
So, any other tips that you think would be important for local businesses and local marketers to think about from an SEO perspective?
I think really the most important thing to me is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because things are changing so quickly. That I mean, that's just my life advice to anyone, but also, especially in the current climate of SEO, things are moving very quickly. There's been a lot of updates going on recently. Um, don't be surprised if you see things change dramatically in the next 3 to 6 months with how search works. Luckily, so far, local SEO hasn't necessarily been hit really hard by these changes. A lot of these things seem to be impacting larger sites and sites or niche sites. But don't be surprised if you do see a major change. Like, be prepared for it. And the way to be prepared is do the right things for your customers. Don't worry about Google. Do the right things for your customers, and you'll likely be in the right side of whatever update comes along.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think from the sort of Barnacle or digital PR perspective, making sure that Google and Bing and everybody, including the LLMs, know what you're doing for customers and that you're
Yeah.
in the business of delighting those customers. Also, to some extent, in my opinion, future proofs you against when there's no SERP, right? Where the
Mm-hmm.
person may start doing voice search on a mobile device and just you know
Yeah.
getting directly to that specific HVAC company or that
Mm-hmm.
specific pool repair company or that
Right.
that specific spa, right? What's the best spa in downtown Atlanta? There, it may just be one, and it may come directly
Yeah.
out of an LLM, right? And so the only way to really manipulate that is, lots of content that talks about how great you are.
Yeah, pretty much coming from everywhere, not waiting for you to see a competitor to do something, taking the taking the initiative to be as far as wide and far as you can be on the internet, like anywhere you can be being there so that you can have as much visibility as possible. Like really, I feel like that's like think about it like you're growing a business. But stop thinking like don't think about it as you're doing SEO. Think about it as you're growing a business. And if you were growing a business, you would do those things. So no one would have to tell you that you need to be on this site where it lists a bunch of your competitors. You would just be there because that's where your customers are. So like, yeah, that's a really good mindset to have about it. It's just like, if you're doing it that way, you are going to be more likely be on top with when the weird algorithm changes happen. Not to say that Google doesn't always, not to say that Google always gets it right. There are definitely times where things have happened in search and updates, and they're like, oh, guess we're going to have to do another update. So it's not as if it's perfect or anything like that. But I do think a lot of times we get really worried about updates, but if we're doing the right things by our customers and by their customers, we're going to be fine.
Yep, absolutely. Those are great words of wisdom. Finally, what has you excited about the next year? Anything specific?
What has me excited about next year? Speaking at MozCon again, that's definitely something that has me excited about next year. And speaking at Brighton next year too. Those are things that I'm most excited about. I really enjoy public speaking, which is so odd because I have like crippling social anxiety. But the only time I feel like I don't have it is when I'm in a stage surrounded by a bunch of people. And when I'm talking about SEO, just because I love doing it, I love talking about it. So it makes it so much easier to do it, even if I'm on a stage. But I'm looking forward to it because I also love Seattle and San Diego. So,
well, absolutely, it comes through. It's an area you're passionate about. So thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with everybody. And I look forward to seeing you on stage face to face and live.
Thank you.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.